I've been one of the most vocal critics of this Payday and PUBG collab since it was first announced over a year and a half ago. The entire concept felt ill-conceived from the start, dragging resources away from the floundering mainline title that was Payday 3 at the time, straight after Operation Meditbag, did tangible damage to the game's second year, not to mention the franchise's reputation. But doing so for a limited time collaboration with a game that has relatively minor Western presence seemed even more transparently foolhardy, clearly attempting to capture an audience for the Payday franchise that fundamentally doesn't really exist. Yes, this work-for-hire contract was profitable, but it certainly wasn't sustainable, hence why they've made it clear this won't be a recurring revenue source by laying off many of the Payday devs who perform this contract work, and the true opportunity cost still remains to be seen. However, the PUBG x Payday event is now live, meaning I have to live with it. And somehow, despite actually playing it, I'm even more confused about what this is and who it's for than I was last year when it was announced. This is Payday 3, quite literally in PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, but missing so many core features and mechanics it's barely recognisable, despite ripping Heist over so directly. Dallas & Co. dropped into empty husks of maps from an existing game with no soul, simplified mechanics, and, get this, no civilians. Oh, and also, this is not Dallas. I'm not sure what they did to him. I assume it's got something to do with the US flag on his mask, but this ain't him. It's his AI-generated cousin. Anyway, Paycheck Gang Dallas aside, this is all very strange. The heists are fundamentally built on the same framework as in Payday 3, just with slightly varied objective design and spawn logic. Your specials are sort of intact. We have dozers who are hyper-aggressive and comically dab on the heisters by covering their visors with their arms, cloakers who are fairly incompetent from my experience, but do kick and ambush as intended, and that's it. Light and heavy SWATs are also roaming around, although it's not the NYPD in this game, it's Treaty, who are an existing faction in Payday 3. They're Concord's mercs, a little like Murky Water, but this is another form of tacit censorship that adds to that unnerving feeling. Like, the Secure Capital Bank is no longer a bank in name, and I assume that's just due to the connotations of robbing such institutions, which begs the question, how did this collaboration ever make sense to anyone? Back onto gameplay, the gunplay itself is fine, if somewhat limited. It's just PUBG, right? There's something to be said for the fun of playing on these familiar heists in third person, but I'm not sure how long that novelty will last. Balance is also entirely out of the window, with some of the shotguns in particular feeling like you're pissing in the wind, whilst others are notably deadly. Grenades regenerate on a timer, meaning the classes with Molotov cocktails can basically shut down choke points in perpetuity, and the equipment slot value is wildly inconsistent, ranging from making your armor effectively unbreakable to refilling a bit of ammo when used, which is extra redundant when there are infinite ammo sources on the map. It's this total lack of care and polish that unfortunately stands out for any play sessions lasting more than a single heist. Even if you try to contextualize it as a free-to-play mode within a game that's obviously built inside a battle royale, that's only going to be around for 28 days. It's hardly an excuse to release something in a state that feels this untested and janky. How they expect streamers to grind this mode out for weeks for a bafflingly massive 100k prize pool is a complete mystery to me, and wouldn't be ethical even if the mode was a 10 out of 10, let alone whatever this is. At best, this is 3 hours of inconsistent, half-functional content to experience. People streaming this into the double digits for the slim hope of earning some crafting bucks have my absolute sympathies. I digress though, back onto brass tacks. The mode released with 4 heists all ported over from Payday 3 at seemingly random. There's no real pattern or logic to it. No Rest for the Wicked is here, obviously, although with slightly adjusted objectives, forcing to drill our way inside rather than use any thermite, and with a new roadside escape, which is by far the better RNG to roll. Diamond District is the only non-launch Payday 3 heist in the game, with a similar open looting design principle, needing to drill or locate C4 and keycards to enter the separate stores, and open up the escape, which also has a sniper killing prerequisite a la Panic Room. You can tell this was developed a year and a half ago because it retains the slow as mud snipers from back at launch. Still, I actually quite like this more free roam approach to Double D's, and locating heist tools like C4 to simplify objectives is solid design, which could probably be better incorporated into Payday 3 if we're being honest. Then we have Nightclub, or Rock the Cradle, which is another simple lootathon now, needing to open a gold vault rather than steal a crypto wallet. I like that it's canonically closed for renovations, explaining the lack of civs in addition to some of the different design ideas and objectives, but at the end of the day, this is another loot sandbox in a familiar setting without bringing much else to the table. Finally, there's Road Rage, which is a totally redesigned heist, actually having more in common with the armoured transports from Payday 2, as it starts with the vehicles already knocked over, meaning we just need to drill and blast our way into the 3 cars to steal their loot directly, rather than escorting anything along the bridge. I like this approach the most of all 4, actually presenting a new experience from front to back, and feel the bridge setting actually works better when it's not totally linear objective-wise. But this really is the best of a fairly bad bunch in my opinion. You might wonder, as I've just described how these heists function in loud, what about stealth? Well, fear not, loyal viewer, stealth absolutely exists, but does so as a total aberration of the term, somewhere in the interstice between a horror and an idle game. The objective layout is virtually one-to-one with loud, which results in some of the most perplexing design decisions I can imagine. Take, for example, No Rest, which of course requires you to drill your way through to the vault, in both approaches, meaning I'm not even sure it's possible, as security will hear the sound of drills, go to investigate, and cost you a point of suspicion, which works somewhat like radios, except it includes all suspicious actions like shooting cameras. In other words, you can nail down stealth perfectly, and yet still fail the heist. Not to mention, it's bloody boring having to wait for drills whilst not much else is going on. Some of the most egregiously unthought out design I can fathom, leaving stealth feeling like a totally unfinished afterthought. I mean, even when it's working, it feels like more of a rip-off of the Roblox game Notoriety than a Payday title, with the optimal strategy being to lick the walls to avoid cameras, and mostly sprint past guards before their AI wakes up and makes some "must-have been the wind"-esque comment. An appalling representation of stealth in any Payday game, and probably an approach that would have been better off omitted from the mode in its entirety, rather than released in this state. In fact, 99% of stealth gameplay boils down to waiting for your equipment and ultimate ability to reset. Yes, this mode added ults to Payday, enabling you to shut down cameras briefly and functionally become invisible to everything on the map. This is Clover's build specialization, which is a system I should probably touch on more, as I actually think it works okay in concept, giving us an approximation of the class-based role-playing system Payday 2 launched with. Essentially, there are 5 archetypes in the game attached to any heister without an American flag on their mass. These all have linear skill unlocks, the only form of progression in the mode, as well as specific weapon classes, equipment types, armor weights, and active abilities. Wolf's Assault class rocks assault rifles with Bulletstorm, which allows you to fire without using ammo for a time. Joy's support class is SMG focused with a full team Inspire skill, which hilariously isn't even close to the best pickup in my opinion, despite being able to revive the entire team from anywhere. Chains' tank setup is shotgun centric, with the ability to become literally immortal for an extended period, undoubtedly the best option in the game for Loud, which totally breaks the balance of it even on the hardest difficulty. Hobson's Marksman class is built around DMRs and being able to deal headshot damage anywhere on the body, which appears to be one of the best ways to delete dozers, whilst Clover is the ghost on this crew with more SMG options and that very convenient invisibility button, which works in both Loud and Stealth. To be fair though, with how god-awful the AI is in this mode, you'll feel invisible half the time even without the skill active. Honestly, it's appalling, making Payday 3's Lemmings appeal relatively responsive. To counteract their lack of brain cells to rub together, the treaty troops are exceptionally quick over ground, rushing you most of the time during the brief assault windows, which have been truncated to fit the more bite-sized experience. Those in particular move in ways you will not have seen before, which is a nice segue onto difficulty, because this mode can be, despite it all, still a little bit tricky on hard until you know what you're doing. Let me be clear, normal is a walk in the park. Nothing hits particularly hard, and with infinite ammo bags placed around each heist, in addition to armor being endlessly regenerating, with more in common with Payday 2's system rather than 3's, it's actually harder to go down than it is to stay alive. That all changes on hard, where things ramp up in terms of time to kill, damage received, and cop swarms. It's very easy to get overwhelmed, particularly if you're not using one of the few chosen weapons that actually hit hard enough or you're in a full squad. For example, I don't know why you'd use any shotgun other than the final one you unlock. It's better in just about every way than its competition, again displaying this total disdain for any semblance of game balance. Now we can counteract that difficulty completely with one simple trick. The tank skill line is frankly so poorly conceived, it might as well invalidate 99% of the loud gameplay design completely. Immunity for that length of time is not okay, enabling you to do just about anything with complete impunity for the duration and take out the 2 dozers per wave who will be the main roadblocks when going for hard difficulty completions. Again, I know it's not a serious mode or anything, but how did this slip through the cracks? It basically invalidates all other classes without particularly trying, as well as totally circumventing that relative difficulty I mentioned can be present when playing without it. That being said, this level of critical scrutiny is probably more than the mode ever expected to face, and deserves to be frank, but I think it does bear remembering that this is functionally an advertisement for the Payday franchise. Which begs the question, is this a good representation of Payday? I mean, at least they got the balance issues spot on. In all seriousness though, I fear the way this game has been designed is going to have the opposite effect. Players are going to bounce off its buggy presentation, barely functional yet advertised stealth experience, and all over the place balance and approach difficulty. As a result, I'm not sure it's going to convert into the interest and sales so transparently hoped for. And for those who are at least intrigued by the concept, I can confirm Payday 3 is a better game, but suspect most are more likely to stop by the infinitely more accessible Payday 2, which runs better on most machines and has glowing reviews in comparison. Which leaves an even more bitter taste in my mouth when I consider the practical cost of developing this mode for PUBG. On the PUBG side of things, this is the first time I've ever installed the game, and I have to say, it's an absolute bloated monstrosity and new player nightmare. Menu after menu of collab, monetization options and separate currencies. All the filth I didn't realise still flew in this sphere of gaming. And although I must confess a number of the Payday cosmetics in its battle pass are quite nice, including a set of masks, which is where most traditional collabs end, a glance to the left will take you over to whatever the hell this shit is. Horrifying anthropomorphic character skins, AI slop as promised by Krafton, and more confusion in terms of art style and pricing. And that even seeps over to the Payday portion, as you can see from this title card I mentioned earlier, which uses the original Payday 2 box art, which is sacred I think, but replaces Dallas with this monstrosity. Again, this should beg the question, why embark on a collab when it's so clearly a nightmare to fit your game's poster child into, and overall premise for that matter? Speaking on playing PUBG for the first time, by the way, this game is so strangely cobbled together. I'm sure its mechanical rigidity is part of what's hampering the objective design and complete botching of stealth, with many relics of the BR bleeding into the mode's obsession with finding objective tools in boxes and somehow making the loot system clunkier with no way to toss bags over distances. This is the issue with utilising these PUBG building blocks to effectively recreate Payday 3 heists rather than trying to build something unique from the ground up. A great comment I saw on stream was that this is what Payday 3 might look like in a dream, or being played in the background of a low-budget 90s movie, which is absolutely spot on. It's this uncanny valley, nagging sense of how does this exist that makes it hard to just enjoy even at face value. Predatory monetization, hideous UI design, and a genuinely headache-inducing lack of noise leveling.
They're not handing it out willingly. Find them. Locked up nice and tight. The security.
All make the mode less approachable for even genuine fans of the Payday series trying it out for its novelty. A couple of positives to end on though after that inevitable tirade. Locke's back as this game's handler, and that is a breath of fresh air.
Big door. But we've got a big drill, hey? Go grab the thermal lance. Let's show 'em who's boss, huh?
The lack of voice acting variety in Payday 3 has done poor Shade no favours, as Ian Russell has done an excellent job reprising his role across all these heists. I also think there is just about enough novelty here with the likes of the nightclub and road rage adaptations to be worth a quick look. Just don't touch stealth. I appreciate what they've done thematically to work within the constraints of dragging these missions over from the third game, so there is potentially something worth experiencing for serious Payday mega fans, possibly enough to convince first-time players to at least look at the source material, but unlikely to be something you come back to beyond a single short play session. But I suppose, who cares that it's not going to have much longevity when the bloody event only runs for the next 28 days anyway. All of this work, all of those now terminated work contracts for something that will be lost media within a month. I find it genuinely stomach churning when I think about it too much. In a different climate for Payday, this could have been something to celebrate, especially with crossover content finally going both ways, with new cosmetics coming to Payday 3 in the May update. But knowing what we do in terms of the time lost and brand damage of this endeavour, I'm left with a familiar feeling of disdain, back to where I was during its initial announcement. I can't deny a lot of time, energy and effort went into this, but that's actually part of the problem when you give it some thought. Time will tell if it makes a dent on the numbers, but I suspect players are going to be just as perplexed as I was after a few minutes playing. I stand by that this never should have happened, and now that it's here, I don't even know what I'm looking at half the time. A total bastardization of the Payday formula, which might be worth a play for posterity's sake, but nothing more. A predictable outcome that can hopefully be left in the past as a historic cock-up made by previous leadership. Payday's been on a much better trajectory of late, but this event's a reminder they hit a little close to home after the launch fiasco. Here's hoping it's a blip and the upcoming Payday 3 update gets things back on track. Thank you so much for watching, have a great day free of PUBG characters getting stuck in the floor if possible, and I'll see you all very soon in the next video. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.